So, as everybody is coming into the webinar room, I want to take this moment to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from this afternoon. If you haven't already, pop into the chat, say hi, let us know who's here, let us know where you're joining us from, and if you see a name you recognize, go ahead and give it a little wave. I want to welcome you to the very first Terry Fox Legacy Circle storytelling webinar for this very special 45th anniversary year. Today, we have an incredibly meaningful conversation ahead of us, a personal behind-the-scenes look at a crucial time in Terry's life. It's a part of a story that happened before the one that we all commemorate on April 12th. And to help us tell that story, we have two very special Judiths, two women who knew Terry during one of the most vulnerable and formative times of his life. Judith Fox is here with us, Terry's sister and the legacy giving manager here at the Terry Fox Foundation. And Judith Ray is with us this afternoon, the head nurse of pediatrics, the pediatrics ward at Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster, BC, where she met Terry and the Fox family during that incredibly challenging time. Their conversation today is an opportunity to hear about Terry, not just as the Canadian icon we all have come to love, admire, and support, but as the young man facing a life-altering diagnosis surrounded by people he cared deeply for and people who cared deeply for him. As for me, I'm John Kiersey. My connection to Terry's legacy started all the way back when I was a teenager in St. John's, Newfoundland, where on the evening news on April 12th, 1980, I watched Terry dip his leg in the Atlantic Ocean before facing the rain, the sleet, the hail, and even the snow that is all too common in that time of year in Newfoundland. I participated in the very first Terry Fox run in 1981 and for several after that, of course. And I organized the St. John's Terry Fox run for 3 years. As I left high school, I was humbled beyond belief to receive the Terry Fox Humanitarian Award, which changed my life. I wouldn't be here today speaking with you if I had not received that honor and the scholarship that went with it. I was fortunate enough to go on and become a member of that board and, in fact, chair it for 3 years. When I was finished with that, I was invited to be on the Terry Fox Foundation board. And recently, in October of last year, I left the board and joined the organization as its chief philanthropy officer. And it's such a pleasure to be in a space where there's such passion and such great productivity and commitment to Terry's vision. I am a proud Terry Fox Foundation legacy supporter. I made that decision and that commitment when I was 32 years old. It was an easy decision for me. Terry's story is not just about the past, it's about the future. It's about ensuring that his vision continues and that we support the researchers, the breakthroughs, and the people who are making a difference in the fight against cancer. It's about us together finishing Terry's marathon of hope and cancer. So before we dive in, just a quick couple of housekeeping notes. We always have those, of course. Today's session is being recorded, but don't worry, attendees will not be visible. Second of all, we will have time for questions at the end. Drop them into the chat, and a member of our team will do their best to get as many of the questions directed to Judith and Judith as possible. We're going to try and stay within the hour because we know it's a work day for many of you, but we're so grateful that you're here. So thank you for being here. It means so much to all of us at the foundation, and I know it would mean the world to Terry. And with that, let's get started, and I'll turn it over to Judith and Judith.
Thank you. Judith Ray, we're here.
We are.
We are. You know, when we started talking about these storytelling webinars, you were starting already. You were the first one that I thought of because it was where Terry's journey began. I reached out to you after 48 years to say hello and to see if you would share your story from 1977 with our supporters. I have little recollection of that time of my life, and I really wanted to hear your story, our family story. I want to point out Allison Ince. I know she's here somewhere. We have a mutual friend in Allison, we discovered, and Allison was at Royal Columbian Hospital when Terry had to stop his run. We also learned that you lived 4 minutes from me. What a miracle that was. And it's been a wonderful experience, Judith. And the bonus of it was the friendship that has developed since this all started. Before we get started, there is a letter or was a letter from Terry that was on the screen as our viewers sat in the waiting room. Could you tell us a little bit about that letter and the significance of the story today?
Thanks, Judith, and it's great to be here and recognizing all the folks that are here sharing this experience with us. That letter was one that Terry sent to me when I was half a world away in January of 1980, about 4 months before the run. And I'm going to share some excerpts from it during our conversation because it lets his voice be heard as well as ours. But I wanted people to know what the context was of it being there when they came on screen.
Well, we've promised a story of Terry, but we can't go further until we learn who you are and your significance in Terry's story. You were born in Berwyn, Alberta, and you became a nurse, going to nursing school in Winnipeg. You made a decision to become a nurse, and we wonder, how did you come to that decision? And work at Royal Columbian Hospital, where you ultimately met Terry in 1977. Right.
Like many folks who find a career for themselves, often it starts early in life. I was admitted to hospital at the age of 5, and ironically didn't have a great experience in my recollection, but at the same time thought I wanted to make a difference. So from that point on, I really was focused on doing something that would be in the healthcare field. And I chose nursing quite intentionally through my teens because I also knew I wanted to have an opportunity to maybe be a healthcare professional in somewhere other than Canada. And nursing was a profession that would probably let that be possible. I moved to BC in 1973. I graduated in 1970, moved out in 1973 to Vancouver, and started my role at the Royal Columbian as the head nurse of the pediatric unit then. And it was 4 years later when Terry was being admitted to the hospital. So we had quite a team at that point and had made quite a few changes. The one thing that I'm very proud of that we did the minute I arrived was that there were very little visiting hours on the pediatric unit. You could visit from 2 to 4 if you were a parent, and from 7 to 8. I had just come from Children's Hospital in Winnipeg where visiting hours were open 24/7. And so I immediately went to the director of nursing and said, we need parents here 24/7 if they wish to be here. And we immediately changed that up. And so we had a great team of staff and parents and kids all being together.
Thank you. When our dad took Terry to the hospital because of the pain in his knee, I was turning 12 and Terry was 18. Could you tell us about that process and some of the decisions made that an 18-year-old would be on a children's ward at that time and under your care?
Sure. I received a phone call from an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Piper, who said he had a young man he wanted to admit to the hospital. He couldn't find a bed in the adult ward, and he knew we had a vacant bed. Could he come to us? I have to describe the ward to you so that you understand what it's like. It was in a portable building off the edge of the hospital because they were in the process of redeveloping a new tower. So we were in a modular structure in the shape of an H, with one long arm of the H being where the cribs were for the young kids, and a long arm of the H where the older children were, with 9 girls in one section of that arm of H and 9 boys in the other room. So it was kind of like summer camp every day in those rooms. You can imagine, with 9 girls, 9 boys, total chaos. But it was also a place where everyone would feel the support of each other. So the kids really were reinforcing each other's abilities. So when Dr. Piper told me he was a young man of 18 with the high possibility of being diagnosed with osteosarcoma, I said, our unit's a way better place for him to be than an adult unit anyways, because the adult orthopedic unit was going to have primarily elderly folks with hip fractures and hip and knee replacements and activities that were going on that were not relevant. And I also knew that an 18-year-old dealing with such an incredible diagnosis really needed to be in a place where he could be a kid, not a place where somebody was going to tell him to man up. So we said, yes, come. So he showed up with, actually both your mom and dad came with him. And they arrived at the door. Terry looked at the room and went, oh my God, look at these sick kids. And he immediately rolled into the room and started talking to the children. Well, his parents are at the door saying to me, he needs a private room. We can't have him in this situation. This doesn't look, right for him. And I said, he's going to have a blast. And he did. He immediately was going through the room, talking to the kids, finding out why they were there. There were 2 young boys, age 10 or 12, hanging up in traction from fractured femurs, which was the treatment of the day. And it looks like you're on a rack when you're hanging up with all the pulleys and the ropes everywhere. And he was over there finding out they were going to be in hospital for 6 weeks. And he was horrified that they were going to be in that long, but you could see the switch go on. He came as a kid who was feeling well and just thought he had a sore knee, walking into an environment where he suddenly was aware that children had illnesses of all sorts. And it was like, oh my God, somebody should do something about this, was almost what you could hear him say. So it was amazing to watch him do that.
Thank you. You did say that Terry was in a portable far away from the main part of the hospital. And if patients needed to go for treatment or for tests, a porter would take them. You took Terry, and we're curious about that. Why did you make it different for Terry?
Right. I said to the staff, we were probably as far away from all the diagnostic services in the hospital as you could get because of what was going on with the redevelopment site. And I said to the staff, trying to organize porters is already a problem, but I want an opportunity to get to know this young man because we're going to have some really tough days ahead. So I said, I'm going to take the opportunity. I've got the flexibility being in the head nurse role to do it. And so I did the portering to all of the diagnostic services. And that gave me a wonderful opportunity to get to know him. Terry was the age of my youngest brother. And when I left home, my youngest brother was only 11. So I never got to see my youngest brother kind of grow up through his teen years. When I met Terry, it was sort of like, this could be my brother. And so I really wanted to understand what the nature of the issues were for him. What was he dealing with? He was in first year university. He was studying to be a kinesiologist. He had interests in sports and was on the basketball team. And so I got to know quite a lot about him as we did this moving around the hospital to the diagnostic services. And it was interesting because the last test he had, we were leaving the room and Terry was polite to the folks that he was dealing with. And as we were leaving, he said, thank you to the technician. And the technician looked at me and said, don't thank me. And my heart sank. And we're walking away from the room and Terry said, what did he say that for? And I'm thinking on my feet saying, well, we're not used to being thanked because we're just doing our job. So he was, just in the process of doing a test. It wasn't like, he had to go out of his way to do it. And I'm making this little excuse about why he shouldn't be thanking him, knowing full well that we were about to go into a really tough time and it wasn't the right place for me to start talking about it at that moment.
Thank you. When Terry received his diagnosis of osteogenic sarcoma, our whole family was in the room. But that was unusual for that time, I believe, and normally just parents would be there. Do you remember how that happened and what Terry remembered from our families and Terry's responses?
Yes, when Dr. Piper called me and said, can you get Terry's parents to come in this afternoon because I want to come in and meet with them and Terry and talk to them about the diagnosis. I phoned your parents and I said, bring the kids as well. I want everybody to hear this at the same time. The kids were yourself at 12 and your brothers were 14 and 16, I think. And it was an opportunity for everybody to hear everything all at the same time. It was going to be very difficult given what I knew was coming down in terms of the diagnosis and the treatment ahead for parents to try and absorb all that information themselves, never mind try and transmit it to you guys as children. So I said, everyone needs to hear it at the same time. They all will have different questions. They'll all want to know how they fit into the situation as well. And they want to know what's ahead for Terry. So you were all there. Dr. Piper started by talking about the actual diagnosis itself and then told Terry that he was going to end up having to have an amputation quite quickly. And because of where the cancer was located, it was going to be quite a high amputation. He would be fitted for an artificial leg, but it would take a bit of time because the stump needed to heal first. So everybody's absorbing this information. When Dr. Piper then talks about the fact that he's also then going to have to go to the cancer clinic quite quickly and begin chemotherapy because this kind of cancer really needed some very strong, at that point, we're talking 1977, very strong chemotherapy. And unfortunately, there would be some side effects from the chemotherapy, like hair loss, which horrified Terry and you in particular, because loss of hair is always really a defining moment for somebody in their teens. However, he did reassure him that after the chemotherapy was finished, it would go. And then he talked about the fact that, there would be side effects from that, but the recovery, would take probably in 18 months to 2 years, things would be better. Then Dr. Piper said something that I always hoped he hadn't said, and that was, you don't need to worry about the staff. They know what they're doing. In fact, they just had another young girl in here fairly recently from Port Coquitlam who had a similar diagnosis. And Terry perked up at that point and said, and how's she doing? And I looked at Dr. Piper and I had to say to Terry and to all of you, she's died. And that was the defining moment for Terry and all of you realizing this wasn't just about a problem that would be removed, chemotherapy would treat it, and everything would be fine. This had quite a high possibility of being a terminal illness. Dr. Piper at that point left, and we stayed chatting for a few minutes there. And the first thing Terry said to me was, I don't want to die. And my response to him and to all of you was that what you have a choice about is how you respond to this. And so gathering all your strength together and doing what you can to deal with it is what we're all going to do with you. And I want to share what he wrote to me in the letter you saw at the beginning of the webinar. Since I won't see you again between now and my run, I would really like to thank you for all the help you've been to me. I think you can remember how much I enjoyed my stay in the Royal Columbian. How many people can actually say that they didn't want to leave a hospital to go home? I give a lot of credit to you for my immediate strong attitude and drive. I can still remember the night when Dr. Piper told me that I was going to have my leg amputated and go on to chemotherapy. At first, it was terrible, but it didn't last long. I remember you telling me that I could still finish my university and that I could keep in shape. I was too busy to ever go into depression or feel sorry for myself. Now I have the chance to help others just as you helped me, only in a different way.
You're not stopping on that. Oh my gosh. Um, yeah, I don't remember, like I said, much of anything from that day. But can you tell us anything that you remember about Terry's recovery? He wasn't someone who liked to show vulnerability. Did you see glimpses of determination that would ultimately set him on the path to run across Canada?
Absolutely. And it was interesting because it was a Friday afternoon when we had the family meeting. And it was the weekend when nothing would be happening in terms of, the surgery was going to be the next week and no more tests were going to be done on the weekend. So I had said at the time, you need to stay in hospital overnight. We keep your bed, but you can go out, whatever you want to do on Saturday, whatever you want to do on Sunday, go out and do the things you need to do and see the people you need to see and talk to the folks that will really help you kind of come to grips with what you're dealing with, so that you can then come back in on Monday and, be ready to take this on. So I was off on the weekend, came in on Monday and asked him about the weekend. And he'd done some really wonderful things, including going up to Simon Fraser University, which is where he was going to college anyways, but he loved that location. And so he spent some time, sort of walking around up there, thinking about it, talking to friends, doing the things that were needed for him to get his act together. And then we did the surgery and he was up on crutches the very next day, which is typical after an amputation. And he was immediately going around the room on his crutches, talking to the other kids, in particular, those two boys that were hanging up in traction because he knew they couldn't get out of bed. And he was actually feeling more sorry for them not being able to get out of bed than he was for himself up hopping around on crutches with one leg. His coach had come in to see him on the Friday night after we had our family meeting, and he brought in a magazine that had the picture on the cover of a fellow with an artificial leg who just completed the Boston Marathon. And Terry had identified the fact that that was one of the defining features for him as well in terms of giving him the strength for recovery. And I'll read you what he said to that about that. Did you know that when Terry Fleming brought me that magazine with the runner that night before my amputation that was running across Canada actually popped into my head there. It took me 1.5 years to start running. And I did get started because running across Canada kept coming back. Now I'm to the point where an incredible fantasy and dream can actually come true. So we never know what tiny item is the kind of thing that gives people the spark that sets them on a journey.
Well, I just had something to say about that and it's left me already. You had said earlier about the recovery is normally 18 months, but he was already running at 18 months.
That's right.
That's right. Healed fast, obviously, and he did everything that was told of him.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
After Terry was discharged, he came often to Royal Columbian Hospital to see you and to see the hospital team. You mentioned that it was unusual that most patients coming back would be there for tests or treatments, but there was something, but Terry didn't, sorry, but we wonder why Terry did it and what do you remember from the conversations with him at the time?
Sure. So he was in hospital for about 4 or 5 days after his amputation. So we had about 10 days where we were engaging with him. And it was not just me, of course, it was the whole nursing team. We really had a role in pediatrics of being coaches and cheerleaders. That's really what we're there for. We coach families, both the parents and the children, around how to be successful and cheerlead them every step of the way. But we had Terry leaving from an amputation without getting to see his new leg. And so that was one of the things we said to him. We really wanted to come back and show us his new leg when he got it, because unfortunately he couldn't get fitted right away. You have to let the stump heal and it has to be changed and shaped before the prosthetic can be attached. So he came back the first time to show us his new leg. And I think the experience he had with that, the excitement that we all showed, and the opportunity he had to then sit down in my office with me and talk about that experience, I think gave him the sense that this is a place I want to stay connected to. These people know what I'm dealing with and they care. And so he would come back. He came back when he lost his hair and had a horrible wig he wanted to show me. And then he was coming back as he was recovering from the experiences of the chemotherapy, talking about the tragedy that he was seeing around him in the cancer clinic and the shock at how much illness and death there really was. And he only became aware of it when he was in that environment, of course. And so he started talking right then about we need research to stop this. And he was really impelled to start talking about what all of us could do. He never, of course, thought he could do it himself, but he thought, what can all of us do about that? And so he was talking to me about that at that point in time. So I'm going to share what he wrote about that experience. He wrote, I will never forget the terrible days I had while in the cancer clinic, and I'm very happy to have the chance to help all those people who now have cancer. I hope that I'll be able to help not only those people with cancer, but also all others who are experiencing emotional problems.
Thank you. I'm wondering, when did Terry tell you that he was going to run across Canada to raise money for cancer research? What was your reaction? And I'll say my mom's reaction was she was angry, trying to change his mind. And she said, you know, why can't you run across our home province of British Columbia? And Terry's reaction was, not only people in BC get cancer, but people across the country and around the world get cancer. And my dad said, when's he going? So, as a medical professional, did you have any concerns?
I didn't, because of the way it unfolded. So he was coming back for the visits that I talked about, and gradually he started talking about how he was getting back into sports. So he started running. He got onto the wheelchair basketball team, the cable cars. They started winning national championships, and that was a hoot for him because he'd been on the basketball team at Simon Fraser, but he'd sort of been on the B team. Hadn't, you know, he was a good basketball player, but he was never going to be a star. And now he's on the cable cars on the wheelchair basketball team, and he is a star, and they're winning national championships. So he was really excited about that. He started running really seriously at the level where he could actually participate in marathons, because he knew if he was ever going to do what he was dreaming about, he was going to have to do marathons. And it was after he started running at the marathon level that he then started talking to me seriously about doing this across the country. And I mean, even then in my mind, it hadn't come to me that it was going to take a marathon distance a day to be able to do this in the time that it needed to be done from the point of view of the climate and weather of Canada. He, of course, didn't have to run 26 miles a day all at once. You can spread it out over the day, but I mean, I couldn't run 26 miles in a month, never mind every single day. And so I gradually began to realize what he was talking about, but he was so engaged in the idea and so committed to the idea that all I could see any of the rest of us having as a responsibility was to cheerlead. If you've got a dream and you really want to try it, I'm going to be there for you till the end of time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. While Terry was training to run across Canada in his Marathon of Hope, you were planning to move to Papua New Guinea. And we would all love to know why you were moving to Papua New Guinea.
Well, as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons I chose nursing was because it would provide an opportunity potentially to work internationally. And so I had started exploring the opportunities to do that, and an opportunity to teach community health nursing in Papua New Guinea surfaced. So it's interesting because while Terry was talking to me about his dreams and plans, I began telling him what I was planning to do as well. And he was as excited to hear about what I was learning about what I was going to end up doing as I was about him. So we actually ended up being mutual cheerleaders around an idea that was a bit crazy for many of the people that we knew. So I did end up moving to Papua New Guinea to do that work in August of 1979. And the letter that Terry wrote was in January of 1980. So when I left, he wanted me to correspond. He wanted to know what was happening in Papua New Guinea. And I said, no, I want to know what's happening on your run. So we'd exchanged addresses, and I had sent him a letter around Christmas time, sort of giving him a sense of what I'd learned in the 3 or 4 months I'd been there. And so his letter was a response to that. And I'm going to read a bit about what he wrote at that point. He said, "You are right. I do believe in climbing mountains. I plan on doing my best to make this trip successful, not only the running part, but also the fundraising part. My confidence in myself has really grown because of my training, and I have run through sores, bone bruises, shin splints, a cold and terrible fever, torrential downpours, hail, snow, and across ice. This, combined with the fact that I have now covered 2,400 miles, that's how much he did in his training, leaves little doubt in my mind that I can do it."
Thank you. Without internet and TV, you didn't have the same experience that many Canadians had at that time, watching the iconic Terry running his Marathon of Hope. But you did get updates. Could you tell us about Terry's communication with you during his Marathon of Hope?
Absolutely. What was really exciting for me, as you say, I was in a location with no communication internationally much at all. Mail took about 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks to get to me, because I was on a remote archipelago off the coast of Papua New Guinea. I wasn't even on the mainland of Papua New Guinea. And I started getting postcards. So he sent me a postcard from each of the provinces as he finished. So when he finished running across Newfoundland, I got a postcard. Same with Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Quebec. And because of the timeline, I had a sense of when I should be expecting one from Ontario. And just as I was realizing that I hadn't had the postcard from Ontario that I would normally have expected at that point, I suddenly was inundated with mail. And I got mail from a ton of friends and family, sending me envelopes full of stories from newspapers and articles, letting me know that unfortunately the run had ended because of Terry's recurrence of cancer and what was happening with all of that. And it was a really hard situation to be in so far away, because I'd been so connected to the process up to that point, so excited to see him actually involved in doing the run. To now have to deal with this experience at such a distance was really hard. I mean, there's no way I could phone and talk or whatever. So I did write a letter to him. And I remember, I don't have a copy of it, but I remember saying to him, "The situation that you found yourself in now is really awful. But in fact, what it's done is probably helped everybody really realize what a reality the cause is that you were running for. This wasn't just something that you wanted to do because you thought it was a good idea. You were living it, and you're now living with the impact of what this illness is for people. And so people will respond in ways that they probably wouldn't have without this calamity happening, because they now are sort of really connected to the cause."
When did you finally learn that Terry had to stop and return to the Royal Columbian for treatment?
In the letters and mail that I got from home and the articles that people sent me. I didn't have an opportunity, as I say, between that time and when he died in June the following year, to have any personal contact with it along the way. But I need to tell you folks about something that happened that was, as we've described in one way, a bit of a miracle. I had spent half my time in Papua New Guinea. I was there for 3 years. The first year and a half, I was on the archipelago outside of Rabaul. In the second half of the time I was there, I was up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And I went to an outstation for one of the health services there that I was looking after. And I was staying overnight, and there was a school there, and they brought in some films to show. And there was a film night happening that night that was supposedly going to talk about coffee plantations. And so I was invited to be there, and so I participated, and they took the reel out of the container and put it on the show machine to show it. And the first heading is not coffee plantation, it's the International Year of the Disabled. And Terry was featured in it running. And it was the first time I'd actually seen the visual of him running in the run. And I burst into tears, and the whole room's going, "Are you that disappointed it wasn't a coffee movie?" They had no idea why I was crying. So of course I had to tell them the story. And it was a miracle in that it finally closed that piece for me. It really helped me sort of see the whole thing, see the picture, have the reality in my own heart of what had happened, and be able to relate to it.
Thank you. Before I go on to the next question, Judith, I just want to share with everybody that my mom and dad often had dinner with you and your husband, Fred. Yeah, and I didn't know that, and it really, I think it was an important part of the story as well.
Mhm.
Mom and dad continue to be grateful to you for all that you did for Terry.
Yeah, and it was helpful to have the connection over time, because it's not that common that a healthcare professional has that kind of intensity in terms of a relationship with a patient and family. And one of the opportunities that made that possible at that time, back in the 70s, was that it was more typical for people to spend more time in hospital. And while our system has become more efficient and, manages so many things on an outpatient basis, the opportunity for being there in a more compassionate and human contact with somebody who's dealing with a situation like that is less possible, because you just have less access. And so I had an amazing opportunity at that time to spend the amount of time I did with Terry, and to some degree with the family, to be able to have then the opportunity to be supportive and follow along the story afterwards.
Mhm. And again, before I move on, I just want to share for my brothers that Fred was actually 19. He was 14 months
He's older than Terry, right?
And Daryl would have been turning 15. So we were all still pretty young.
Yeah.
The last question I
Mhm.
have is in two parts. Reflecting on all of this, I'm wondering what you would say about the impact Terry had, or the impact your role and Terry had on your life, and when you became aware of the impact you'd had on his life.
Right. I think the impact that he had on me was to recognize, and I've always valued that in my whole healthcare professional experience, and I know everyone online that's involved in healthcare would say that too, that every encounter has the possibility of being life-changing. It can be so for the individual, it also can be so for the provider. And so I never want to take any of those encounters for granted. You never know when you are making a particular impact at any given time. Another thing that I learned from Terry, and I always say when I'm involved in any of the runs, is that he demonstrated that an ordinary person can accomplish extraordinary things. And he didn't do it entirely on his own, clearly. I mean, obviously, the whole world got engaged in the process over time, but he was the spark, he was the impetus, he was the person that started the ball rolling. And he was just a regular guy, regular person going through school, a regular person playing on a basketball team, regular family member, regular everything. And all of a sudden, his life became something completely different, and he made something of that. The other thing that I mentioned just a minute ago is those human connections in healthcare are a huge part of the healing journey. And I wouldn't want us to ever look for ways to be so disconnected. There's a role for things like AI in the world, but there's never a replacement for that human connection that is so important in helping people deal with the issues that they're encountering in an illness or an injury or a death experience that they need that personal contact for.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that, we've always said that Terry would never, or we wouldn't, nobody would finish Terry's Marathon of Hope. But with the film Finish It, it clearly shares that together we all can finish cancer, and how important that is that we come together and we do that.
That's right.
And I think that today has been amazing, and I'm so grateful for you for taking this time and doing this. And if you don't have anything more to say, I think we should go on to a few questions.
Sure.
I'm not sure. Thank you.
So I can you see the question from Dawn, Judith? Okay, it says, how did you each support Terry in post-cancer treatment, anxiety and stress, the post-traumatic stress disorder? I actually would say that that's one of the features that we probably were helpful for Terry, but not as much for Fred, Daryl, and Judith. And I think in the situation that we were in at the Royal Columbian, we only had Terry with us for about 5 days after surgery, and then we didn't see the family for the rest of the time. The next place the family could have been supported and helped through the process was the cancer clinic. But again, I think the cancer clinic in that era, and I'm not sure now, was very much focused on the treatment of the individual and whoever might be there with them from a family perspective. So the support that I think teenagers could have and probably needed to have to get through this process, watching their brother go through this experience. And then again, when Terry had the recurrence and went through the profound period of time of losing his life, there wasn't really great support around for you guys as his siblings. And I recognize that now, and I'm not sure that our system has a really good way of dealing with it, but I think highlights to everyone who has any role to play in that they might think about it for sure, in terms of how we do provide that kind of support to the siblings and to the rest of the family around an individual dealing with this.
Thank you. Oops. Are you reading them?
I can do that. I'm a retired school teacher and made it a point of sharing Terry's story with my grade 5 students. You could hear a pin drop during my presentations, and I felt their heart reaching out to Terry. Yes, absolutely. What is your fondest memory of Terry? And they're asking that of both of us. So you go ahead, Judith. Your fondest memory of Terry.
Well, that's tough. Terry was 7 years older than me. Honestly, he was often the third parent. If my parents went out, he would make sure my homework was done, or he was more of a parent. But he was also very fun, and Christmases were fun. My family is a bit quirky, and so I do remember some really incredible times with Terry because he was home so much. Yeah, I can't think of anything else at the moment. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I think what I would say is he had a twinkle in his eye. And it was interesting. One of the things I'll just share this from the letter as well, because here he was telling me sending me a letter, getting ready for this marathon to run across Canada. And in the letter, he was responding to my Christmas letter from Papua New Guinea. It sounds like you're having a very exciting and challenging time. I've always wanted to travel, but have never had the time or money. I bet you never have a boring moment or day while you're there. Do you ever get lonely or homesick? I guess that your comrades have helped with that problem quite a bit. Have you gotten used to the changes in food and water? So, you know, despite the fact that he was all excited about what he was doing, he had not lost his ability to also be interested in what others were doing, including me in that situation. And there's a question from Jim. What's it like to see the progress of cancer research? What would you say, Judith?
Well, I would say that I can't remember the percentage of when Terry was diagnosed, but 52% is in my head of survival.
Yeah, even worse. It wasn't,
Even worse.
osteosarcoma in the 70s still had a very high death rate, unfortunately.
Yeah. And today, and I've actually known two different people that have been, or teenagers that have been diagnosed with osteosarcoma, and they haven't lost their leg. You know, one of the kids told me that he's got like a bionic leg now, and people don't die from that disease
Right.
either now.
So there's a question here from a woman saying, I'm interested in finding out what kind of support exists, if at all, existed for the parents. Both my brother and I had or have cancer, my brother being cancer-free and me with terminal cancer. I'm wondering because there's none currently, which I see as a gap, but I think there may have been more back then. I actually don't think there was any more back then. I think it's an issue that we really need to have better connections to. And I know that there are some people online. I know there are some people online who will have been part of the patient advisory group to the foundation. And I know some of what they'll be thinking about as patients and families is what are the resources and supports that need to be put in place, and that some of the research be done around how you help families and connections to families and friends cope with the process of providing support.
And from my point of view, um, I'm not saying this to be rude to my parents, but I was sent away. I was sent to our neighbor's house for a good few weeks at least, which was really close, but still I felt that I was sent away. And also my parents being back in 1980, that time I was not permitted to do very much. I was always grounded and I always fought it. But I realize now I have 4 adult children of my own. And I realize today as a parent that my mom didn't know any different. Like it was always a fight for us. But I know now that she just didn't want to lose another kid, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think Terry understood the impact his Marathon of Hope had on the world? I don't know whether he lived long enough to realize that the run would be going on year after year, but Judith, what was it like for him in sort of a May, June before he died? Was he aware of the fact that there was a growing surge there?
Yeah, he was aware early on, actually, after he came
Okay.
home. Mr. Sharp, he had sent a letter to Terry or a telegram to Terry and said that the run will continue. So Terry did know there was going to be a Terry Fox run across the country, and that made us very comfortable. You know, it was such, yeah, it just made us comfortable for Terry and grateful that this was going to be put on, because I think it also eased Terry's mind moving forward.
Mhm. Cool. That's a tough question. I've been to 4 funerals in the last 4 weeks, all from cancer. What do we say to those families who ask, is the Terry Fox research doing what we think it is when we donate funds every September? Good question. I know one of the things that's really been wonderful in the last short period of time is that the research that's being done across the country is now being coordinated. And people are working really hard to share at the same time the research they're doing. So instead of people having working in isolated labs where they do their own thing, it didn't work out, they now go on to something else. They're now able to share all of that across the country, and that's making strides really quickly. We also know that there's much more work being done on how to personalize the treatment process so that the cancer is being looked at from a genetic perspective, and the genome projects that are going on are much more able to begin that work. It's not, definitely not perfect at the moment at all, but the work is really focusing on trying to find ways to be much more personalized in terms of that treatment process.
Ashley, were you going to jump in?
I am actually going to see if Dr. Isabel Serrano can be unmuted. I'm looking for her right now because I think, Isabel, I'm giving you a heads up. We'd love to have your insight on this, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was actually posting on the chat a link to the Marathon of Hope Cancer Centers Network. This is really the realization of a long-standing vision of the Terry Fox Research Institute and the foundation, and it's inspired by Terry's Marathon of Hope. The network is a powerful collaboration that is joining all the countries. So we have 42 institutions across the country that have joined the network. All 10 provinces are represented here. And what they are doing is advancing precision medicine for cancer. So we are creating a data set, getting a lot of the genomic information, the clinical data information of patients, and that will inform how to treat cancer patients in the future, so we can do more of a personalized and target the characteristics of the tumors of each patient that are different. So it's a wonderful collaborative, continue growing, and really happy to present that to the audience today here.
Thank you. Last question.
How will you two be marking or celebrating the 45th anniversary of Marathon of Hope this year? What about you, Judith?
Well, I'm not sure. I never actually say where I'm going to be on run day. I like to see if there's somebody run that might want me at theirs first. So I don't know where I'll be. But I know there's a lot of exciting things happening. And yeah, it's an exciting year.
And I live here in Mission, so I will be part of the run here in Mission. So that's where I'll find myself that day, for sure.
How about you, John?
I will be here in Toronto, I believe, but who knows? As you say, there are a lot of possibilities around this, and if I'm stumbling, and I think this is a conclusion for our time anyway. It's because I'm gobsmacked. This has been one of the most powerful Terry moments that I've ever experienced, and I can only imagine that everyone who's participating in this today has that same sentiment. And I want to applaud both of you, Judiths, your courage, because this could not have been easy today to have this conversation. And I've come to know Judith Fox quite well.
Thank you, John. You're right.
And I know the love and the joy. And when she shared with me that she had met Judith Ray, and the impact that had, I didn't have any idea that it was going to have the impact it's having on us here today. So thank you to both of you. This is extraordinary. I think this is actually where Finish It begins. This takes it back farther than April 12th, 1980 for me and for all of us in this room today. Judith Ray, you're a power source. And I want to thank you for being a power source to Terry, being a power source to somebody who continued to ignite the world around cancer research, and not just about cancer research, about what it means to be courageous, determined, have tenacity, have faith, have hope. Thank you for that. And so for everyone who's joining us here today, thank you. And I want to thank Isabel too for jumping in there on the spot to talk about the Marathon of Hope Cancer Centers Network, because it is powerful. What's happening in cancer research today, thanks to the Terry Fox Foundation and the Terry Fox Research Institute, is powerful. And use the link that Isabel shared to learn more about it, or write legacy at terryfox.org. With any specific questions, we'll be happy to get back to you. So thank you, Judith. Thank you, Judith. Thank you to everyone across the country for joining us. Thank you to our staff at the Terry Fox Foundation for bringing this together today. But none of this would have mattered if you weren't here with us, all of you here today. So as we get ready for the 45th anniversary year, there couldn't have been a better beginning than this. So whether you're on this line as a member of the, the organizer of the Terry Fox Run, a participant, a donor, a part of the National Ride of Hope, if you work at Terry Fox Foundation, Terry Fox Research Institute, or if you're part of the patient working group or the Terry Fox Legacy Sisters Circle, thanks for your presence. Thanks for your generosity. And for those of you who have included the Terry Fox Foundation in your estate plans, a very special thank you to you. And for those who are considering that as an option, feel free to reach out again, legacy@terryfox.org, and we can help you with that. It's up to us to continue Terry's dream. It's up to us taking the words that Judith and Judith shared with us today to make sure that Terry's vision comes true, a world without cancer. So together, we're going to finish it. Thank you all very much. What a powerful,
thank you.
Powerful hour.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who wanted to be part of it.
Thank you so much.